Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing amazing. Australia's weird geographical quirks. I'm trying to think of weird Canadian geographical quirks. If you're new here, my name is Mace. I'm coming to you from Canada. And I'm just thinking to myself, what's weird? Not that much, really. I guess the US and Canada share some of those borders, which are just endless straight lines. I'm sure some of the borders between states in Australia are the same. Just straight lines for the eyes can see. You have entire provinces. We have provinces and territories. My apologies if I screwed up how you designate those in Australia, but you know, some of them will be just straight up and down, like a giant rectangle. And others, like the BC border and the Ontario-Quebec border, they're incredibly... often, you know, they might go along rivers and they might go along different geographical features, which I think is probably correct to some degree. Like, I don't know if the one between British Columbia and Alberta, like, I'm curious now, does it just go literally through the Rocky Mountains? Like, are the Rocky Mountains the boundary kind of thing? I just want to quickly look. I'm curious now. This is what these videos do to me. This is what this channel does to my brain. So, yeah, I mean, it looks like pretty much, you know, if we go to satellite view, yeah, pretty much just cuts through the Rocky Mountains there. And then once you get through the Rockies, or that portion of the Rockies, you just zip straight. Now, if we look at Australia, let's check this out. Yep, look at that. Zip. Western Australia has got that straight line stretching thousands of kilometers. Northern Territory, so yeah, they're basically split up, except Victoria. It's a pretty intricate one. It's probably around a river. Yeah, looks like it spans rivers and or bodies of waters and lakes and forests and mountain ranges. So pretty much the same. Cool. All right, let's check out these weird geographical quirks.
Here are some geographical quirks of Australia that you might not already know. These are the Australian states and territories. Here's Tasmania, the only island state
Tassie,
ringed by ocean and cut off from the rest of the continent by the Bass Strait. Except it's not quite. If we zoom in, we can see that Tasmania and its northern neighbour state Victoria actually share a land border on this tiny and uninhabited island. The maritime border between the two states cuts right across Boundary Islet. This little islet border anomaly arose as the result of surveying errors and misinterpretations when repeatedly carving off sections of the colony of New South Wales into what are today Tasmania and Victoria. Boundary Islet is basically a chunk of rock that sometimes has some seals lounging on it. Speaking of disjointed borders, the Australian Capital Territory, or ACT, was carved out of New South Wales so the federal government could have a territory of its own from which to govern.
What is the point of that, though? I want to look more into the ACT, the Australian, what was it called again? The Australian Capital Territory. Is it bear any semblance of similarity to, like, the District of Columbia? I don't know, they seem... my bad for making a comparison to the States, but I'm thinking, like, Canada doesn't really have an enclosed governance state. You know, the capital of Canada is Ottawa, and it's just
out of New South Wales,
a city
so the
in
federal government could have a territory
Ontario
of its own from which to govern. But they felt strongly about the federal government also having access to a seaport. So instead of making the ACT somewhere on the coast, they just annexed another small territory, the southern peninsula of Jervis Bay. Jervis Bay is a separate territory from the ACT, but when it comes to federal elections, the people of Jervis Bay vote in the electorate of
Jervis Bay,
which is centred in the ACT. And in terms of geographical quirks of electorates, spare a thought for the people of Norfolk Island, who vote in the ACT electorate of Bean, 1,900 kilometres away. But that isn't even
the electorate of Beans
local representation in the country. The electorate of Lingiari encompasses the red centre of Australia, the tropical top end of the Northern Territory, minus the urban areas of Darwin and some of Palmerston. And Christmas Island, which is 2,500 kilometres away. And there are some even more widely distributed pockets of Lingiari. Maybe it needs a video of its own. While we're on the topic of the outback, Australia is home to some really large pieces of land that are used for cattle stations.
Did anybody watch that? It was kind of like what I call Netflix's AI blender. I saw a trailer for a show. It looked like, honestly, for lack of a more eloquent way to put it, it looked like Australian Yellowstone. I can't remember the title of it. Let me know if any of you guys watched it.
The largest is Anna Creek Station, which is the largest cattle station in the world. It's over 23,000 square kilometres, which is a larger land area than 50 of the world's countries. And it's also true that the country of Brunei used to own a station in Australia that had a larger land area than Brunei itself, although it sold the station in 2018. Back to the state borders now.
Brunei. If memory serves, it's one of the worst countries in the world.
And while Australian Aboriginal people have of course been living on the land with their own boundaries for tens of thousands of years, when white colonists tried to divide it up, the results were imperfect. Here's the border of Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia. Looks like it should be a pretty neat line, right? If we zoom in, we can see that the borders are actually a bit of a mess. Victoria juts out to the northwest. The river boundary moves from being along the southern bank to being in the middle of the river, and the intersection of the three states is in the middle of the river. So why isn't this just a nice line? The 141st meridian was originally surveyed to be the eastern border of South Australia. However, it was incorrectly placed about 3.5 kilometres west of where it actually lies. When the mistake was discovered, New South Wales decided it was fair enough and established the accurate meridian as the border. Victoria kind of went, yeah, no, we like the border where it is, leaving us with this mess today. And Australia has another line that looks straight, but it's actually not. The borders of the Northern Territory, South Australia, and Western Australia. This north-south line cutting across the entire continent looks dead straight, but if we zoom in, we can again see there's a tiny perturbation. This deviation is only 127 metres long, and was of course the result of another surveying error 100 years ago. The border was intended to be approximately on the 129th meridian, so instead of measuring from one end of the continent to the other, 2 points were picked at either end that were pretty close to the meridian, and a north-south line was drawn from each point. Except, of course, the points were not exactly on the meridian, so the north-south lines didn't match up. Instead of fixing it, they just drew an east-west line to join the two north-south lines up.
Fair enough.
Could they have fixed it? For sure. But they had actually already agreed not to worry too much about little slip-ups like this. They'd agreed that an academic result was not to be sought after with a high and fanciful degree of accuracy. A century-old way of saying, she'll be right.
Like, honestly, does it even matter? Like, borders are interesting, right? Because we can't see them. I mean, borders that are within a country, like, say, Australia, or a country like Canada, where the borders within the country, it's not like they're visible. And the same with, like, even the US-Canada border. There's enormous portions. It's actually I think it's the longest land border in the world of, like, unguarded portions of it. Of course, there's the portions that you see, like, if you're crossing into the States, legally, that is, you're going to go through a land crossing with all the gates and fences and walls, all the big, beautiful walls. Yeah, it's going to be great. We're going to pay for it. Tremendous walls. But for the most part, it's just forest. However, I do believe they have a large, like, deforested portion of it through the middle, so it is visible in a way. But yeah, who really cares? I think these little quirks, if nothing, are somewhat interesting. The real world effects I'm more interested in, like, is there somebody's house who ends up being, like, right in the middle of the, like, things like that would be
just a
funnier.
Couple of my fellow Victorians who, like me, thought they had a good mental map of Australia in their head, but maybe I don't. Adelaide is north of Canberra, and Perth is north of Sydney. These realizations actually blew my mind. Well, that's it. I hope there was something for everyone in this video. Surprise island land borders, silly electoral boundaries, surveying mistakes, and surprisingly northerly cities. See you next time.
Good stuff. I like this guy. Can't remember. Is this the same guy that did the video about cartography and like city names on maps? You know, Alice Springs was kind of central to that video, and how, you know, when you zoom in and zoom out, the original cartography or the map makers, they had to decide, like, there's only certain names we can fit, right? And you know, if you have like the Americans and all of their big cities on the East Coast there, like, which ones do we include, and how those things happen. I can't remember if this is the same guy, but if it is, he's a legend. I like him. I want to look up one thing about from that video is Christmas Island. I think I've heard of this before. Christmas. Why is it coming up with Cape Breton? Christmas Island, Australia. Australian External Territory. Christmas Island, officially the territory of Christmas Island, is an Australian external territory in the Indian Ocean, comprising the island of the same name. It was located approximately 350 kilometers south of Java, and Sumatra. And it's a long ways away from the Australian mainland. Interesting. How many people live here? Ethnic groups. 22% Chinese, 17% Australians, 16% Malay. Flying Fish Cove, eh? Looks pretty nice. Very nice. And where is this in relation to Philippines? Oh, way a ways, but kind of the same. You know, I've been to Southeast Asia, and you get that humidity, that heat, the tropical vibes. Philippines was enjoyable, very enjoyable. Anyways, good stuff. All right, we'll see you all in the next one. It's absolutely monsooning outside right now. The weather's a bit of a gong show, but 'tis what it is. I'm off to a stag party this weekend, boys. It's gonna be good times. So I'm gonna be probably offline for a little bit, but alas, I'll be back into it. There's a link in the description to send me vids, send me articles, send me whatever you like. Send me a note saying you don't like my face. I will read it, and I will dismiss it if I deem it dismissible to be not read. But let's just end the video while I'm ahead.